There's a kind of truth that doesn't shout. It doesn't knock on your door or demand your attention. It waits, silent, still, soft as the breath you didn't realize you were holding. It rests not in the noise of books or philosophies, but in the unnoticed spaces of your life. The hush before dawn, the exhale after tears, the moment you stop chasing and start listening. Maybe it was always there, tucked in the stillness, in the spaces between words, between accomplishments, between identities. Maybe, just maybe, everything you were trying so desperately to earn was never outside you to begin with. It's strange how we spend years climbing, striving, acquiring, convinced that the next title, the next applause, the next possession will finally quiet the longing inside. But what if all that effort was not a pursuit of happiness, but a reflection of our distance from ourselves? What if the longing was never for things, but for home, and that home was within? Letting go has been misunderstood for too long. People fear it means giving up on joy, abandoning the world, rejecting beauty. But true detachment isn't rejection, it's recognition. It's knowing that the beach is beautiful, the car thrilling, the skydiving exhilarating, but none of them define you. None of them are your source. They're only echoes, expressions, the surface shimmer of a deeper well already inside you. When joy becomes tethered to the external, it becomes a fragile thing. It sways with the wind, dissolves with a shift in weather. Because the world was never built for permanence. To build your peace on its foundation is to anchor yourself to sand. Peace is found elsewhere, in alignment, in integrity, in the rare but powerful convergence of feeling, speaking, and doing in harmony. When your internal world stops contradicting itself, when your intentions align with your words, and your words align with your actions, and your actions align with the natural rhythm of life, something changes. You stop resisting and start flowing. Life, once a battlefield, becomes a current you move with. And yet, most of us move in chaos. We say we want one thing but act in opposition. We send mixed signals into the universe, into our relationships, into our own hearts. We plant seeds of hope and water them with fear, and then we wonder why they don't grow. But reality is responsive. Energy doesn't lie. A seed nurtured with love, effort, and patience has no choice but to bloom, maybe not on our timeline, but in its own right season. Desperation tightens the soil. Certainty softens it. Dreams don't require clinging, they require care, they require trust. And that trust begins not in others or outcomes, but in the quiet knowing that you don't have to lose yourself to find your path. What is meant for your soul will never demand its compromise. It will fit like breath in your lungs, like rhythm in your step. Still, many wait for someone to hand them the map, to offer the keys, to whisper the secret that will unlock it all. But every real teaching, every profound, sacred truth has always turned us inward. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love deeply while bound in your own suffering. You cannot lead while lost. So the work begins inside, not out of selfishness, but from necessity. You fill your own cup, not to hoard, but so you may overflow. So you may offer something clean and whole and real. And this giving, this compassion, it's not born of pity. It's not a superior gaze down upon the suffering of others. It's the recognition that there is no other. That your joy and their joy are intertwined. That the pain you see in them echoes your own. That separation is the illusion. And the deeper that recognition goes, the more hollow the idea of individual success in a broken collective becomes. You cannot thrive at the top of a burning mountain. The smoke will find you. Harmony isn't idealism, it's survival. Living authentically begins with one terrifying step. Seeing yourself without illusion, without justification, without the filters of habit or the armor of ego. Are you moving from truth or convenience? Are your decisions rooted in clarity or fear? Can you sit with your own contradictions without flinching? Observation is the beginning, but it is not enough. You must pair it with courage. The courage to hold your gaze when what you see makes you uncomfortable. The courage to act on what you find, not to shame yourself, but to rise. Awareness without bravery becomes paralysis. Bravery without awareness becomes recklessness. Together, they form the key to real change. And your body is not just flesh and mechanics. It is your sacred ally, Your body becomes your trainer, your mirror, your ground. It is in the tremble of your muscles under stress that you hear the whispers of your own mind. It is in the burn of exertion that you meet the voice that says, I can't. And it is there, at that very edge, where truth lives. The moment you want to stop, but choose to continue anyway. That is transformation. That is freedom. Not freedom from pain, but from the false belief that you can't endure it. And slowly, that practice becomes more than physical. It becomes a kind of moving meditation, a dialogue between strength and surrender, discipline and grace. You begin to live in your body with reverence, not using it, not judging it, but honoring it as the vessel through which all your becoming flows. In that alignment, spiritual, mental, and biological, you start to notice the world differently, not as a place to escape from, but as a place to immerse in. You don't wait for perfect conditions, for a perfect trip or perfect partner to feel alive. Aliveness becomes your default. You taste your breath. You feel the earth. You begin to remember what you forgot while scrolling. That your skin holds memory, ancient and primal. That your fingertips crave not glass screens, but tree bark, running water, warm stone. You remember that your life is not meant to be downloaded, but experienced. That presence is not a luxury, it's a birthright. There's a moment when you realize the person you've been obsessively thinking about is not the one haunting your thoughts. The truth is, it's your own reflection in them that your mind keeps chasing. Not their smile or their silence, not even their absence. It's what they awakened in you, what they stirred, what they left unfinished. That kind of presence is powerful. It doesn't require touch or words or even proximity. It lingers in the hidden corners of your inner world, surfacing during quiet moments, like a ghost without a grave. It's not obsession, it's not weakness, it's a message from a version of you that still holds on to an experience not for what it was, but for what it meant. You're not chasing a person, you're chasing meaning, understanding, completion. When someone occupies your thoughts for days, weeks, or even years, it's easy to mistake that persistence for destiny, as if the universe is pointing you toward them, whispering that they're your missing piece. But maybe the universe isn't pointing you toward them at all. Maybe it's pointing you toward yourself, using their memory as a mirror. Because mirrors don't lie, and sometimes it takes another person to show you your wounds, your longing, your unmet needs. Maybe they reflected the kind of love you never gave yourself. Maybe they reminded you of the rejection you still haven't healed. Or maybe they simply arrived to play their role. Not to stay, but to wake you up. And that kind of awakening isn't pretty, it's raw. It tears you open, not to hurt you, but to show you what you've kept buried under smiles and distractions. You think it's about forgetting them, but it's not. It's about remembering yourself. The self before them, the self beyond them, the self that forgot its worth when love felt conditional. It's about reclaiming your inner space, the thoughts, the energy, the nights you surrendered without consent. That space was never theirs to own. It was yours to protect. And now it's time. Not time to erase the memories, but to stop letting them write the story. You are not a supporting role in someone else's script. You are the author, the narrator, the soul behind the scenes. But you can't write a new chapter while clinging to a page that hurts to reread. There's a kind of clarity that comes not from talking to them again, but from talking to yourself differently. From shifting the question from why did they leave to why did I stay? From what did I do wrong to what did I tolerate for too long? These are not comfortable questions, but they're the ones that lead to liberation. Because you can't heal a wound you keep pretending isn't there. And you can't move forward if your feet are still planted in yesterday's heartbreak. What you need is not a text back, not an apology, not even an answer. What you need is peace, and peace is born from surrender, not to the other person, but to the truth. The truth that sometimes people leave not because you're unworthy, but because their role was temporary, because their chapter was only meant to stretch you, not sustain you. Let's talk about memories for a moment. They're not just pictures in your mind, they're emotional records. And your brain doesn't store them in a cold, logical format. It stores them with feeling. That's why a song, a smell, a street corner can flood you with emotion out of nowhere. It's why someone's absence feels like presence in disguise, because the emotional imprint they left doesn't fade with time, it fades with transformation. The more you grow, the more distance you create between who you were with them and who you are now. That's what eventually weakens the grip of nostalgia. Not denial, not suppression, but evolution. You don't forget them, you outgrow the version of you that clung to them. And in that growth, you begin to see love differently. You start to understand that real love doesn't confuse, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't punish you with silence or make you beg for crumbs. Love in its purest form liberates. It amplifies your peace, not your pain. And when someone triggers your inner chaos more than your calm, it's not a soulmate connection. It's a spiritual lesson, one that keeps repeating until you learn to choose yourself over and over without guilt. So don't chase closure where there's only ego. Don't chase answers from people who speak in riddles. Don't chase love from those who don't even love themselves. Choose you. That is the ultimate revolution. The mind has a way of replaying the pain as if repetition will finally bring relief. But pain doesn't dissolve by re-experiencing it. It dissolves by replacing it with truth, with new perspectives, with healthier narratives. That's why healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about reinterpreting it. It's about telling yourself a better story. One where you're not a victim, but a survivor. Not someone who was abandoned, but someone who was redirected. Not someone who lost love, but someone who is learning what real love feels like. And that story, your story, deserves to be told with power, not pity. You are not broken because you care deeply. You are not weak because you still think about them. You are human. And humanity is messy, emotional, beautiful, and strong. But don't let your humanity be manipulated by memory. Feel, yes. Reflect, yes. But return to yourself, to the present, to the breath, to the life that is still waiting for you outside the loop, outside the what-ifs and could-have-beens. Because life is not lived in hypotheticals. It is lived in choices. And you, right now, are standing at the edge of a new one. The choice to release what's no longer yours. The choice to heal, not because it's easy, but because you deserve to feel light again. Your healing doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet, gentle, slow, a daily decision to turn inward, to soften your grip, to trust that letting go isn't loss, it's liberation. And when that truth lands, not just in your mind, but in your bones, you'll stop chasing closure. You'll stop chasing them, and you'll start chasing peace, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. There comes a point in every journey where you begin to recognize the subtle power of awareness, the quiet yet undeniable shift from being consumed by someone's memory to consciously observing the pull they once had on you. That moment, though small, is everything. It's when you no longer ask, why can't I stop thinking about them? But rather, why have I given them so much space in my sacred inner world? And that question isn't rooted in judgment, it's rooted in awakening. Because the truth is, we don't fall into obsession overnight. We feed it, thought by thought, memory by memory, until it becomes a part of our mental landscape. But the same way we fed it, we can starve it. Not through force or suppression, but through the gentle practice of reclaiming our focus. It starts with presence, not dramatic action, not declarations of moving on, just presence. Sitting with yourself and choosing to show up for the now instead of retreating to the past. And this is where most people struggle because the past is familiar. Even if it hurts, it feels safe, predictable. But the present, that's uncertain. It asks you to be uncomfortable, to sit in the rawness of healing without distraction. Yet, this discomfort is where your power begins to return. When you stop using their memory as a crutch and start standing on your own 2 feet, you begin to witness the rise of a new self, the self that is no longer defined by what was lost, but by what is being reclaimed. You'll notice something else too. As you detach from their presence in your mind, you begin to feel the weight of your own unmet needs, the emotional hunger you tried to fill with them, the validation you were so desperate to receive, the need to be chosen, to be seen, to be enough. These aren't weaknesses, they're human truths, but they're also invitations. Signs pointing you inward, asking you to become the one you've always waited for. The one who offers love without condition, presence without performance, and safety without silence. Because when someone lingers in your mind for too long, it's often because they touched a wound you never knew was bleeding. And now, that wound is ready to heal, not by their return, but by your return to self. There is sacredness in silence, in choosing not to text, in choosing not to stalk their stories or analyze their likes. That silence is not emptiness, it's space. Space for your energy to return home, space for your heart to breathe without chasing, space for your soul to whisper. You are enough, even without them. And it's in this space that new clarity is born. You begin to see the difference between love and attachment, between missing someone and missing the version of you who existed in their presence. You start to see that sometimes we mourn not the person, but the potential, the life we thought we'd live, the version of the story that only ever played out in our imagination. And when you realize that, something shifts. You stop waiting for them to reappear and start becoming the person who no longer needs them to. This doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't mean you erase the love or pretend the connection never mattered. It simply means you accept it for what it was, a chapter, not the whole book, a lesson, not your final sentence. You thank it, you bless it, and you let it go. Because clinging to what was only delays what could be, and your future is too precious to be postponed by a past that isn't changing. There's something incredibly powerful about forgiveness in this process. Not just forgiving them for the confusion, the silence, or the pain they caused, but forgiving yourself for the nights you stayed up wondering, for the messages you never sent, for the ones you did, for the hope you held on to long after it expired. Self-forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength. It's the mature recognition that you did the best you could with the emotional tools you had. And now you are wiser. Now you see clearer. Now you're ready to live from a place of truth, not longing. Remember, healing doesn't always look like closure wrapped in clarity. Sometimes it looks like acceptance without answers, peace without explanation. Sometimes it's simply the decision to stop bleeding over someone who didn't even know you were wounded. And in that decision, you take your power back. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, quietly, fully. You become the safe place you always sought in someone else. You become your own home. You don't need them to miss you. You don't need them to regret. You don't need them to understand what they had. Because the real question isn't whether they'll ever realize your worth. It's whether you finally will. Because when you do, when that worth roots itself in your bones, you stop chasing ghosts. You stop rereading old texts. You stop waiting for signs. You stop letting their name echo through your thoughts like a prayer. And instead, you begin writing a new story, one where you are centered, one where you are whole. And slowly, the grip loosens, the mental loop quiets, the emotional fog begins to lift. It doesn't happen all at once. Healing never does, but it happens. With each breath, with each boundary, with each act of self-respect. You don't move on by forgetting them. You move on by remembering yourself. And when that remembering becomes your daily rhythm, you'll wake up one morning, think of them, and feel nothing. No ache, no pull, just gratitude for the lesson and peace for the space they once filled. Because you finally chose you. And that choice, made again and again, is how freedom begins. There's a strange kind of grief that arises when you begin to let go of someone who never gave you the closure you thought you needed. It's not loud, it doesn't knock you over like heartbreak once did. It's quiet, subtle, a whisper that tells you something inside is shifting. Not because they apologized, not because they returned, but because you stopped waiting. And in that moment of not waiting, you begin to realize how much power you've been giving away. Every memory you clung to, every day you replayed conversations, every tear you shed in silence. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about the emotional weight you were carrying long after they were gone. And now you're beginning to put it down. This grief is different. It doesn't ache in the same way. It hums, it invites reflection. And in that stillness, you start to see that their presence in your mind wasn't love. It was a placeholder, a space you hadn't yet filled with your own healing. A space that still waited for answers, even when none were coming. But the longer you sit with yourself, the more you discover that answers aren't always necessary. Understanding isn't always needed. What's needed is presence. Presence with the now, presence with yourself. And that presence is a practice, something you choose every day when your mind tries to drift back, and you gently remind it, we're not living there anymore. The truth is, no one teaches us how to emotionally clean house. We're taught to move on quickly, to find distractions, to pretend we're fine. But the residue remains, the energetic imprints of connections that once felt like home. And if you never clear them, they become emotional clutter. They take up space in your thoughts, in your dreams, in the way you see yourself. And so the real healing begins when you choose to reclaim that space, not by rushing, not by numbing, but by turning inward and asking, what parts of me still feel abandoned? Because when someone leaves without explanation, the part of you that needed reassurance stays stuck in that moment. And unless you go back and hold that part of yourself with compassion, it keeps reaching for someone who already let go. This is why healing is never linear. You'll have days where you feel strong and untouched, and then one small thing, a scent, a song, a photo, will bring it all rushing back, and that's okay. That's not regression. That's remembrance. It's your heart showing you where it still needs tenderness. It's not weakness to feel, it's wisdom to listen. Because the goal isn't to erase the memory, it's to strip it of its power, to be able to look at what once broke you and feel peace, not pain. To know that yes, it mattered, but it doesn't define you anymore. Sometimes we confuse intensity with importance. We believe that because we can't stop thinking about someone, they must be special, meant for us, our other half. But thoughts are not truth. Obsession is not intuition. Sometimes the most persistent thoughts are not divine signs, but unresolved trauma looping through your mind, asking to be seen. And when you recognize that, you stop romanticizing the pain. You stop glorifying the connection. You begin to see that what felt magnetic was often just a reflection of an unmet need, a hunger for love, safety, validation. And when you start feeding those needs yourself, the magnetism fades. The grip loosens. You stop confusing longing for love. This is where emotional sovereignty is born. When you stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, why did I hold on so tightly to someone who wasn't meant to stay? That shift doesn't come easily. It takes honesty, it takes surrender. But once it begins, your entire perspective changes. You no longer see them as the missing piece. You see them as a mirror that showed you where you were still seeking completion outside of yourself. And with that awareness comes liberation. Not the kind that feels like fireworks, but the kind that feels like peace. Like coming home to yourself after a long journey of searching in everyone else's arms. You'll begin to notice the small victories, the moments you no longer flinch at their name, the days you go without thinking of them, the clarity that returns to your mind, the joy that begins to surface in the spaces they once occupied. And these are not just signs of healing, they're proof of your growth. Proof that even without closure, even without an apology, even without reciprocation, you rose. You chose yourself. And that choice is everything. Don't let anyone tell you that detachment means you never cared. Detachment is not indifference. It's the highest form of self-respect. It's saying, I gave my all, and now I give myself back to me. It's the act of honoring what was while choosing not to be enslaved by it. Because at some point, the question shifts from, why did this happen to me, to, what is this trying to teach me? And in that question, you'll find every answer you ever look for in them. You'll realize that the healing you crave from their words, from their touch, from their validation, was always yours to give. You just needed time, you needed truth. You needed to feel your way through the storm and back into your own light. This isn't the end of your story, it's the moment your story changes. Where you stop being the one who waits and start becoming the one who lives. Where your worth is no longer measured by who stayed, but by how deeply you chose to stay true to yourself. That's the transformation, that's the awakening. And it begins every time you say, I release what is no longer mine. I reclaim what was always me. Healing doesn't always arrive like a sunrise. Sometimes it comes quietly, through tiny decisions you make when no one is watching. Like the way you stop reaching for your phone to check if they've messaged. Like the way you no longer linger in conversations about them. Like the way you feel your own breath and realize it's enough to calm you. These small moments don't announce themselves, but they are powerful revolutions. Each one chips away at the illusion that someone else holds the key to your peace. And piece by piece, you begin to return to yourself, not the version of you that broke, but the version that is being rebuilt with awareness, compassion, and strength. Sometimes we get stuck in the belief that if we let go completely, the connection will lose its meaning, that forgetting means it was never real. But the truth is, letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means it mattered so much that you're choosing to honor it properly by not letting it keep you imprisoned. You loved, you lost, you learned. That's not failure, that's a chapter. And just because the chapter ends doesn't mean the story ends with it. You are still here, you are still unfolding, and you still have pages to write. It's tempting to wait for closure, to believe that one final conversation will settle everything. But the reality is, most closure never arrives in the way we expect. You might never hear what you needed to. They may never acknowledge your pain or explain their choices. And that has to be okay. Because closure isn't a gift someone gives you. It's a choice you make for yourself. It's the moment you decide that your peace is more important than their explanation, that your healing doesn't require their cooperation. You stop needing to be understood by them when you finally understand yourself. You may feel like your emotions are too much, too messy, too loud, too overwhelming. But they are not your enemy, they are guides. Grief, anger, confusion, they all point to places within you that are asking for love. Not from them, from you. Because the love you gave away wasn't wasted. It was evidence of your capacity. And now that same capacity can be directed inward. You can give yourself the gentleness you once reserved for others. The loyalty, the patience, the hope. It belongs to you now. It always did. When you begin to take your power back, the world starts to shift. The silence you once feared becomes sacred. The solitude you ran from becomes sanctuary. You discover that wholeness was never about finding someone to complete you. It was about remembering you were never broken, just bruised, just healing, just learning. And as you deepen into that truth, you stop chasing people who are unable to meet you. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that dishonor you. You begin to radiate an energy that doesn't beg to be seen, but cannot be ignored. The most profound transformation happens in the moments when you feel the urge to reach out, but you choose to breathe instead. When you feel the ache of loneliness, but you sit with it rather than numbing it. When the memory surfaces, but you no longer believe it defines you. These are the inner victories that rewrite your story. No one else will see them, but you will feel them. And in time, they become your new foundation. A home built not on someone else's presence, but on your own truth. You were never meant to be a prisoner of your past. The thoughts that loop endlessly, the questions that remain unanswered, the moments that replay in your mind, they are not chains, they are signposts. They are invitations to go deeper, to find the root, to heal the wound. And once you do, those thoughts lose their grip. They may still visit, but they no longer haunt. They become memories, not anchors, lessons, not burdens. And in that freedom, you begin to create space for something new. Not another person to fill the void, but a new version of you to rise from it. You begin to realize that you were never weak for holding on. You were hopeful, you were loving, you were human, and now you are wiser. You don't need to harden your heart or pretend it didn't matter. You simply need to let it evolve. Let the pain do its sacred work of turning wounds into wisdom. Let it carve new dimensions into your soul. Let it show you the strength that was always within you. The kind of strength that doesn't roar, but radiates quietly from within. There will come a day when their name no longer stings. When you pass by places you once shared and feel a sense of neutrality. When your nights are no longer punctuated by thoughts of what could have been. That day is coming, not because you forget them, but because you finally remembered yourself, your worth, your path, your purpose. You are not here to be someone's afterthought. You are here to be your own beginning. Your healing is not a race, it's a sacred walk. And every step you take, no matter how small, is proof that you're doing the work, that you're showing up, that you're honoring the deepest parts of you. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all of this is that as you heal, you'll begin to attract differently. Not just in love, but in life. You'll magnetize peace instead of chaos, depth instead of distraction, truth instead of illusion. Because when you no longer need someone to complete you, you begin to align with people who celebrate your wholeness. That's the magic of healing. It doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you live. There's a shift that happens when you finally choose yourself. It's quiet, almost imperceptible at first, but then it begins to ripple through every part of your life. You speak differently, you walk differently. You begin to move in alignment with peace, no longer chasing, no longer waiting. The person who once dominated your thoughts becomes a shadow in your rearview mirror, not because they didn't matter, but because you finally matter more. And in that space, in that clarity, something beautiful begins to bloom. Self-trust. That unshakable knowing that you are enough, that your heart is worth protecting, that your future no longer belongs to someone who walked away from your story. Forgiveness plays a subtle yet monumental role in this awakening. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean condoning the hurt. It means loosening the grip pain has on your spirit. Forgiveness is the moment you exhale the weight of what they did or didn't do. It's not about them. It's about you choosing not to let bitterness be the echo in your soul. You forgive because peace is more nourishing than resentment. Because carrying the past is too heavy and you were never meant to shrink under its weight. You forgive so you can feel light again, so you can be free again, so you can live fully without ghosts trailing behind you. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest revenge is not proving your worth to someone who didn't see it. The greatest revenge is no longer needing their validation. It's waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought about them in weeks. It's hearing their name and feeling nothing but neutrality. It's smiling not because they're back, but because you no longer want them to be. That's power. That's liberation. That's the silent roar of a soul that's done begging for breadcrumbs. This journey you've been on, it hasn't been easy. The nights where your chest ached with questions, the days where laughter felt like betrayal to your sadness, the countless times you wondered if you'd ever stop hurting. You carried all of that. You walked through it, and you're still here. Stronger, softer, wiser. And if nothing else, let this truth land deeply in your heart. You have not failed because they left. You have not failed because you love deeply. That love was real. It was courageous. It was a reflection of your humanity. And just because it ended doesn't mean it was worthless. It means it had a purpose. And that purpose might have been to return you to yourself. You see, sometimes the people we lose are the mirrors that show us where we still need to grow. They reflect our wounds, our hopes, our hidden beliefs. And when they leave, we're invited to look at ourselves not through the lens of what was lost, but through the lens of what can now be reclaimed. Your worth, your power, your light, they've always been yours, even in the silence, even in the heartbreak, even in the darkest chapters. So what now? Now you live. You show up for your life like you never have before. You chase the dreams you put on hold. You open your heart again, not recklessly, but bravely. You learn to enjoy your own company so deeply that anyone who enters your space must feel like an addition, not a remedy. You fill your days with meaning, with purpose, with joy that comes from within. And when you stumble, as you will, you remind yourself that healing is not linear. Some days you will miss them. Some days you'll feel the ache resurface. But those days won't define you. They'll simply be echoes, reminders of how far you've come. Your story is not over. In fact, this might just be the most sacred chapter yet, the one where you fall back in love with life, with yourself, with the beauty of what it means to be whole. Not because someone else completes you, but because you've learned to complete yourself. That is the gift of this journey. That is the reward of every tear, every sleepless night, every painful letting go. It all led you here, to this moment of reclamation. So breathe deeply, stand tall, and walk forward with grace. You are no longer defined by who you lost, but by who you've become. And who you're becoming is someone who understands that peace isn't found in another person's presence. It's found in your own. You've done the work, you've faced the truth, you've honored the pain, and now you rise.